Okay, so right now let me make this concept simple for you by showing you some animations. And these animations are going to help you to build your fundamental on the front controller. And once you are good with the theory, then we're going to code things out. Okay, so right now you can see there are two different houses on your screen. In this house, there are 4 people staying, let's say mom, dad, a brother and a sister. And let's say there is somebody else staying here in the neighbor's house. Okay, so the reason why I have placed this picture differently right here, right in the front, because he is the dad. He has all the responsibility of this home. He needs to manage everything right here. And actually, if anybody wants anything from this home, let's say if this guy wants anything from this home, that request supposed to go through the dad. Okay, because he is the boss, he is going to manage everything, whatever is happening in this particular home. Clear? For an example, let's say this guy is making some coffee and he is running out of sugar. Now this guy processes a request to this particular home asking for some sugar. As we have discussed, any request which is going to come to this home, this guy is going to handle the request. So the dad handles the request, but he does not have sugar. But he knows who can actually help him to get some sugar. So he dispatches the request to the mom. The mom get him some sugar, and once he got the sugar back, he gave it back to the neighbor. So what we understand from this slide? Okay, I will show you another slide. Just have a look. Great. So what we understand from this slide is, if any request is coming outside from this home, he is the first person who is going to handle that request. And the second thing is, he knows out of all 3 available resources, who is the right person here who can handle the incoming request. In this case, he already knows that this guy has a cricket bat and he can help him to get a cricket bat. So he dispatched the cricket bat request to this particular guy. This guy gave a cricket bat back to the dad and he gave it back to the client who is actually asking for a cricket bat. Simple. Now you almost understand the front controller concept. In a Spring MVC application, this guy is called a front controller. All these people are called as controllers. And this guy right here is called a client. The client means your web browser. It might be Chrome, Firefox, Safari or something else. You can think like somebody is sitting here with a laptop having his browser open. And he is going to type in some URL right here which is going to come to your website. Assume that this is our website called home.com. And he is going to access our website data by sending some request. And all the requests that he is going to send is going to be handled by one of these controllers. So right now you can understand that all this controller does some work. Just like here, if you can see this controller, let's name it as mom controller. And the mom controller here is mapped with a URL called /sugar. So here, if the client is requesting for some sugar, then this is the controller who is going to handle that request and is going to help the client to get some sugar. Just like that, if anybody wants a makeup kit, then the sys controller will come into the picture because C is mapped with an URL called /makeup. So C is going to handle all the requests coming to this website home.com ending with /makeup. And C is going to help the client to get a makeup kit. And just like that, this particular controller, let's say he is a bro controller and he handles all the requests ending with /cricket bat. So right now you might be thinking, what about this guy? So this guy is your front controller and this guy is going to handle all the requests coming to your website called home.com. And the most important thing is you can only reach to these people through this guy. Every request coming to your website, this guy is going to handle it first. Now you must have a question, why? Because he is mapped with an URL called /home.com and then /star. So what do you mean by /home.com/star? So here /star does mean that after home.com there could be anything. So in one line, this guy is mapped with an URL pattern called /home.com/star. That does mean that he is going to accept all the requests coming from the client starting with home.com, and there could be anything after that. For an example, a URL like home.com/sugar, home.com/makeup, or home.com/cricketbat. If you can see all these URL pattern or all these incoming requests, it starts with home.com. That means this guy is going to handle this request. And after home.com there could be anything, as I said, /sugar, /makeup, and /cricketbat. And based on the request that we are sending to the front controller, he is going to dispatch that request whoever the controller who can handle that request by seeing these URL patterns /sugar, /makeup, or /cricketbat. If the request is /cricketbat, he knows this is the guy who can handle that request. So he is going to process this request to this particular guy. So whatever we understand so far, the front controller is actually not doing the actual work. Rather, he is just routing or dispatching the request to one of the controller who can actually do that work. And once the controller gives the data back, he actually gives the data back to the client. So the front controller right here is actually standing in front, accepting the request from the client, routing that request to one of the specific controller who can handle that request, getting the data from the controller and giving it back to the client again. Okay, so far a lot of theory, but I hope right now you have enough understanding about the front controller so that we can actually start implementing it in our real-time project. And obviously, we are going to bring all these people, all these characters right here in action there in that particular project. So he is our dad front controller, she is our mom controller, sys controller, and bro controller. So you all guys are welcome to our project, okay? Because we are going to implement you right now in Java code. So let's get into it. Okay, so right now, I hope you guys had a kind of understanding about the front controller and what the front controller does. So it's pretty simple, guys. Any request is going to come to our website. The front controller is going to stand in front and is going to accept all the request, okay, which is coming towards your website. And once the front controller accepts that request, then this is the job of the front controller, that he will make a decision that who is the right person, who is the right controller who is going to handle that request, right? Probably a lot of theory. Right now, let's see that in action. Okay, now let's understand, okay, the project that we have created called home.com, how we are going to configure a front controller with this particular project. Okay, now let's see that in action. Okay, so the first thing, you might be really excited right now. You might be thinking, okay, how to create a front controller? Just tell me that. I just want to know the steps to create front controller. But there is a good news, guys. The Spring framework developers, they have already created a front controller. The name of this particular controller is DispatcherServlet. We can use that front controller in our project. We're really not required to create a front controller, but we can reuse the front controller created by the Spring framework developers. They love us so much, they care for us so much, so they have created a front controller for us, and they said, okay, this is the front controller we have created for you guys. The name of the front controller is DispatcherServlet. You take this front controller and you use it. Okay, so as we have already attached our Spring framework jars here, okay, we will be getting that particular controller class for free. Okay, so to see that particular class, what you need to do, you need to hit Command Shift T, or if you're using Windows, hit Control Shift T. Once you hit that, try searching here the front controller name. Repeat that controller name with me. Remember that front controller name. The name of that front controller is DispatcherServlet. So DispatcherServlet. Okay, this is the class DispatcherServlet coming from org.springframework.web.servlet. Okay, this is the package. Inside that package, this particular class is present. I want to see that class, what code the Spring Framework developers have written for us. Let's double click this particular class here, and there you go. We can see the class name here, dispatcher-servlet.class, but the source code we are not able to see it over here. Okay, now that file that you have downloaded for me, a file that you have downloaded for the source code, right? Spring source code, do you remember? We just need to attach that particular file just to see the source code of this particular dispatcher-servlet.class. What is the source code of this particular file? Let's click on attach source, go to external location, click on external folder. Where did you put it? I think I have put it in my downloads folder. So this is that particular file. Let me add the complete file. Okay, let's not waste time on it. Okay, and there you go. Okay, now you get the source code of the dispatcher servlet class. So this is your front controller. This is your class dispatcher servlet that Spring developers has written for us. Okay, so as of now, one thing is clear. The dispatcher servlet is called as the front controller, and whenever I need a front controller, I actually can use this class written by the Spring framework developers. Okay, and where this particular class present, if I open my project explorer, if I click this icon, okay, I can see where this particular class is present. See, this is present inside the Spring Web MVC jar, right? Inside the Spring Web MVC jar, there's a project called org.springframework.web.servlet. Inside this particular class is present, DispatcherServlet, which is a front controller for us. So right now, let me collapse everything. Okay, let me open my .com. Let me go to my web.xml file. Okay, now the thing is why I am coming to web.xml file. Okay, so here I need to configure my front controller. Okay, inside the web.xml file, I need to configure my front controller. Okay, so inside the web.xml file right now, we need to configure our front controller. Okay, so the way I need to configure my front controller inside a servlet and a servlet tag, right? So why I am opening and closing a servlet tag? So your front controller is basically what? Its name is DispatcherServlet, right? So it's basically a servlet. So we need to configure it within a servlet and servlet tag. Now I just need to create a front controller. As I said, I just need to link it over here. So how to link it? So for that I need to use another tag called Servlet class, and here I need to provide the fully qualified path to that DispatcherServlet class. So I'll open the DispatcherServlet class. I'll just right click here and I'll do copy qualified name, go to web.xml, control V it. So this is the class, this is the link to DispatcherServlet class. If I do command click or control click, I should reach inside the DispatcherServlet class, and there you go. You understand it? Now let's go back to web.xml file. Now to this particular class, okay, let's give a name to this particular class. Okay, so if you see our earlier example, we went through a presentation, right? In that presentation we have given the class name. Okay, so we use this guy as a front controller, and we used to say this dad front controller, right? So we in our example, this guy is the dad. Okay, so now let's come back here. Let's give the same name. Let's have some fun. So let's say servlet name, and let's say dad hyphen, let's say front controller, and let's give another hyphen, let's say dispatcher. Okay, just to give a valid name, you know, I'm just giving a name like this. You can give any name to your dispatcher servlet. Okay, now you have given the name to your dispatcher servlet. Now, as I said, what is the job of this particular guy, right? This is a front controller. What is the job of the front controller? The front controller is going to handle all the requests coming to your website. what is the website that we are trying to build here? What is our project name? Home.com, right? So let's tell this servlet, hey servlet, you handle all the requests coming to my website called home.com. Okay, so the way I'm going to tell that to this particular servlet, okay, so I'll give another tag here called servlet mapping. Okay, and inside the servlet mapping, first of all, what is the servlet I'm trying to map to? The servlet name is this one, right? To this servlet, what I'm going to map, Control C it, Control V it, to this is my servlet name, and this servlet is mapped to, let's say, URL pattern. Okay, so what is the pattern of this? So as I said, this particular servlet is responsible for handling this particular URL pattern, right? home.com/star. So let's write the same thing here, /home.com/star. So this does mean that this servlet, that front controller dispatcher, is going to handle all the requests starting from home.com. Then there could be anything, right? home.com/sugar, home.com/books, home.com/anything. Okay, but that should start from home.com. This is the only thing that you need to print it in your brain. Okay, good. So you are done with creating a dispatcher servlet. Congratulations, that's the job. How easy is that, right? Okay, so that's it. So we're done with creating our front controller, right? So whatever the learning that we have taken from this lesson is, we don't need to create a front controller, we just need to reuse a particular front controller present with a Spring framework called DispatcherServlet, and we provide the appropriate mapping to that particular DispatcherServlet right over here. Okay, cool. Okay, so right now we are done writing our front controller in our web.xml file, and it is very simple. There must be some of you, they might be thinking, or they want to ask me a question like, Abhilash, do you really want me to remember all this tag name, servlet, servlet name, servlet class, URL pattern? I'll say don't remember it. The things that we have written here, you can actually write this particular thing by using a IDE shortcut. Okay, so I'll tell you how to use that shortcut. So let me remove all the things that I have written here. Okay, what I'll do, I'll save this particular program. Okay, and to create a dispatcher servlet, I'll go to home.com, I'll do right click, I'll go to new, I will click on servlet. Okay, and here I will check this box, use an existing servlet class or JSP. I'll click on browse, and here I'll search for DispatcherServlet, and it's coming from org.springframework.web.servlet, and I'll click on OK, and I'll click on next. Okay, so here the name of the dispatcher servlet I'll give as dat front controller. Okay, and the URL mapping I will edit it, and I'll say /home.com/star. I'll click on OK, and I'll say finish, and and your IDE has written all this code for you right now. You really don't need to write it by yourself. If you can see, the description and display name is not needed. Let me remove it, and all the remaining code, this is only the code that we have written in the last 4 or 5 minutes, and we have written it in minutes. Just you need to make sure, if you're writing it manually, just make sure that the servlet name you're giving here, the servlet name you're giving here should match, right? So that's how you need to create a dispatcher servlet, or you need to configure a dispatcher servlet either by writing it manually or by making your IDE generate the dispatcher servlet for you. Okay. Okay, so right now the next question is when this dispatcher servlet object will be created, when this dispatcher servlet class object will be initialized. Okay, so we have just configured it over here inside the web.xml file, but when the object will be created, Okay, so the dispatcher servlet object will be initialized once we deploy this particular application home.com inside the Tomcat server. Okay, so let me do that right now, but before doing it, I'll put another tag here called absolute ordering. I'll just I'll just put an empty tag of absolute ordering over here, and I'll tell you why actually I am putting this tag later in this course, right? But the thing is, right now, let me run this particular project in my web server, and let's try to see whether the dispatcher servlet object is getting created or not, or the dispatcher servlet will be initialized or not. Okay, so now let me do what? Let me do right click here. Let me go to run as, run on server. Let me deploy my project in my server by clicking next, and here home.com is already there. So here actually we're trying to deploy our project inside the Tomcat server, and we'll do finish, and I'll do a restart server. Okay, so now let's try to see what is going to happen. So you can see there are a lot of lines in my console, and I want to see my console here. So let me go to the console. So in my console right now, I'll try to search for my dispatcher servlet name, okay, because there are a lot of lines here and I cannot go and cannot individually read this particular line. So the easiest way is, let's go to web.xml file. Let me copy my servlet name here. Let me do Control C and let me go to console. And let me do Control F for search and Control V. Let's say DAD controller here, and let me hit find. And you can see there is no string found. That means my dispatcher servlet object is not getting initialized. So what's wrong here? So if you see in your web.xml file, we have not put any load on stat of tag. So let me put the load on stat of tag here, load on stat up, and I'll give a value called 1. So this will make sure that whenever your server will be get started, this particular class called dispatcher-servlet will be initialized. And if we'll not be putting this particular tag, then what will happen? Whenever the first request will come to your server starting from /home.com, at that time only dispatcher-servlet will be initialized. I don't want it. I want this dispatcher servlet to be initialized during the time of the server start off. Okay, that's why I put load on start off. Okay, so now let me stop the server right now and let me restart it again by doing right click, going to run as and run on server, and I'll click next and I'll click finish. And let me see right now my server is getting, I mean my dispatcher servlet is getting initialized or not. Okay, let me go to console right now, and obviously I'll be getting an exception. I'll tell you why I'm getting it. And my point is right now I'll be trying to search Control F, DAD controller, and I'll try to find it. Okay, that's cool. Right now we are getting it. Now it is saying initializing Spring dispatcher servlet, and the name of our dispatcher servlet is DAD front controller. Okay, that's cool. Good job. We are getting closer to success. And right now you can see it's trying to initialize, but he's saying context initialization failed. Actually it's not trying to, the initialization is not getting completed because of what? Because when it is trying to parsing a XML called DAD front controller hyphen servlet XML. So basically our dispatcher servlet here trying to look for a file called dad hyphen front controller hyphen servlet.xml. This file is looking for inside the web inf directory and it is not finding it. So that's why it is throwing a nested exception called file not found exception, and it is saying could not open servlet context resource inside the web inf directory. It is not finding this particular XML. So what is the story behind it? Now this is the story we need to memorize, and not memorize, we just need to understand. So this is a very simple thing, right? It's a very simple story. Okay, I call it story, a concept you can say. So why it is actually trying to look for that particular file, I'll tell you that thing right now. So guys, see, whenever your dispatcher servlet will be initialized, it will actually try to look for a file inside your web.inf directory with the same name as the servlet. Here, what is the servlet name? Here, my servlet name is dad front controller. So it is going to look for a file inside the web.inf directory called dad-front controller, then -servlet.xml. It will append -servlet.xml with your servlet name, then it will try to look for that particular file inside your web.inf. Now you must be thinking, okay, this is a strange thing. Why is actually DispatcherServlet is looking for that particular file? That is a good question, and that is the most important question. This is the only one thing that I want you guys to aware about. So first of all, before I'll tell you what is that particular file, let me create that particular file for you. So let me copy this servlet name, dad front controller. I'll do dad front controller. I'll do right click copy and I'll go to web.inf folder. I'll create a new file. Okay, but what kind of file I'm going to create? I'm going to create a Spring configuration file. Do you remember in your Spring core days, you have created a lot of Spring configuration file, bins.xml we used to call it. We used to create a file called bins.xml, right? That's used to be our Spring configuration file. We'll be creating an exact similar kind of file just like that. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll click on other. I'm using STS, guys. It's called Spring Tool Suite. It is designed above Eclipse or on top of Eclipse. So all the Eclipse feature you will obviously get over here, and additionally you will get some Spring shortcut. Okay, you'll be using a lot of Spring stuff embedded with this particular IDE. So right now I'll just use a feature of STS. I'll search for Spring Bean configuration file here. Okay, and I'll just click next to this. Okay, and I'll give my file name here, and my file name will be dad front controller -servlet, okay, .xml. So this is my front controller name, dad front controller. Okay, and to this front controller name I'm appending -servlet.xml. okay, and I'll click on next. Okay, so here I want what kind of namespaces I want in my Spring configuration file. I want the namespace for bins, I want the namespace for context, and also I'm dealing with MVC right now. I'll be needing the namespace for MVC, and I'll click on next and I'll do finish, and you will see some magic here. So see, now I am getting a Spring configuration file created by my Spring Tool Suite IDE. Okay, so now the important thing is that I have created a Spring configuration file inside the web.inf directory, and the name of the file that I have given is same as my servlet name, my front controller name, or my dispatcher servlet name. Okay, so if my dispatcher servlet name is dad-front controller, my file name will be dad-front controller, then I'll append -servlet.xml file. So the reason why I have created this particular file is whenever the dispatcher servlet will be initialized, it will by default look for a file inside the web.inf folder with the same name as the dispatcher servlet. Okay, this is clear. Okay, right now let me do save it. Everything is safe. I'll make sure the next thing is I'm going to run this particular project again. So I'll go to run as, run on server. Okay, I'll click next, and I'll do finish again. I'll do restart server, and now let's see my dispatcher servlet is getting initialized successfully, or again it is throwing some exception. Now let's go to the console again. Let me maximize it, and let me go to my console. Let me do Control F, and let me do find here. And now you can see my dispatcher servlet is getting initialized here. You can see a info just here, initializing Spring dispatcher servlet DAD front controller. Congratulations, is trying to initialize it. And the most important thing is here, right now our dispatcher servlet initialization is completed, right? If you remember last time, the front controller is trying to initialize, the dispatcher servlet is trying to initialize, but it was failing because it was trying to find a particular file under web.inf directory, but this file was not present last time. But this time we have created a file with the same name as dispatcher servlet, and this time when dispatcher servlet object is getting created, at that time it is looking for this particular file. This particular file is also present here, and it is initializing successfully. This is the only thing I want you guys to remember right now, right? This much is clear? Good. Okay, right now let's understand why we are creating this particular file. What is the need of this? Correct? That's the question you are thinking? Okay, let me answer you that right now.